We would be remiss of talking about the Native American populations without talking about the European explorers or the leaders that brought the European settlers over. So let's talk about what motivated the European explorers and the European explorations that brought them across the seas to the North American continent. What made them pick up off the safety of the European and Asia continent and send them over across the oceans in for their explorations? After all, they didn't have the modern tools that we have now, and navigation and exploration was certainly a tricky business back then. There was no Google Earth to guide you. So, what made them do it? Well, a lot of different reasons, but when it came down to it, the three G's guided them. And we're going to talk about what those were in just for a few minutes. But let's get a little mind trippy first. I want you to consider something a hypothetical situation, if you will. I want you to take a little mind trip with me. Imagine, if you will, a life without a few things in it. A life a little different as we know it. Can you imagine a life without spaghetti? It's such an American staple right now that it's kind of hard to imagine a life. I don't know about you, but I can't imagine a life without spaghetti, or at least a life without spaghetti sauce. But let's take it a little bit further. Can you imagine a life without pizza? Or how about a life without french fries and ketchup? But how about a life without peanuts? Or seeing somebody smoke tobacco? Or let's do one worse. How about a life without chocolate? These are all items that Europeans never knew even existed. That is, until the age of exploration. Today, the Italians are known for their many tomato based dishes. The Swiss are known for their chocolates. But before 1492, they had never even seen a tomato or a cacao plant. That is chocolate. Tomatoes, potatoes, tobacco, corn, peanuts, squash, chocolate, peppers, tomatoes, pineapples and avocados, pumpkin, peppers, certain beans, all didn't exist to Europeans until this guy, Christopher Columbus. As legend has it, Columbus believed the earth was round, while everyone else thought the earth was flat. As he sailed bravely west across the Atlantic Ocean, he, his crew nearly mutinied, thinking that they would fall off the edge of the earth. Just then, the story goes, the crew spotted land. Columbus had discovered America, the first European to touch the New World. Well, the legend's wrong. But how is it wrong? Well, the Renaissance scholars of Christopher Columbus's day had studied ancient Greek and Arab scientists, and those scientists already known and had shown and proven that the earth was a sphere. Native Americans, we already knew, and we've read the article, we've studied it, we already knew that Native Americans had traveled and had inhabited the North American continent and the West for thousands of years. The Norsemen, led by Leif Erikson, had already landed and briefly settled on what is now Newfoundland, Canada, about 500 years before Columbus's journey. So, what is the truth? Well, two truths can be held evident about Christopher Columbus and his historic journey in 1492. One, he was an experienced navigator who took a highly dangerous voyage into unknown waters. Others had tried and were never heard from again. And two, he certainly did change history. So, for the age of explorations, there were three things that motivated. We can lump the explorers' motivations into three main categories. We call them the three G's: God, glory, and gold. The first one can be attributed to, well, let me back up a minute. Europeans had not been completely isolated from the rest of the world before the 1400s and Columbus's historic journey in 1492. Beginning around 1100, European crusaders battled Muslims for the control of the Holy Lands in Southwest Asia. In 1275, the Italian trader Marco Polo reached the court of Kublai Khan in China. For the most part, however, Europeans had neither the interest nor the ability to explore foreign lands. That changed by the early 1400s. So why did Europeans seek a new route to the Indies and Asia? For one thing, it was for this little plant. This little plant was as valuable as gold. Ancient Romans paid as much as $125 in today's value for as little as 12 ounces of this. Can you guess what it is? If you said black pepper, you're right. Black pepper was as valuable as gold. During the Middle Ages, the pepper in your local supermarket could have paid a year's rent. By the late 1400s, the desire to share in the rich spice trade of the East spurred Europeans to explore the oceans. Other valuable spices were cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. People use spices in many ways: to preserve food, to add flavor to dried and salted meat, and to make medicines and perfumes. Through overseas exploration, merchants and traders hoped ultimately to benefit from what had become a profitable business in Europe: the trade of spices and other luxury goods from Asia. Because demand for these goods was greater than the supply, merchants could charge high prices and thus make great profits. There were several land routes Europeans could take, but they were all controlled by Muslim and Italian merchants. They, they would also have to go through mountains and deserts. One goal was to get to the Indies. They were nicknamed the Spice Islands. This meant finding a sea route directly to Asia. Now, Europeans were able to make the leap into exploring the seas because of some new technology. The desire to spread Christianity, the G, God, motivated Europeans to explore. The Crusades had left Europeans with a taste for spices, but also with feelings of hostility between Christians and Muslims. European countries believed that they had a sacred duty not only to continue fighting Muslims, but also to convert non Christians throughout the world. Europeans hoped to obtain popular goods directly from the peoples of Asia. They also hoped to Christianize them. Bartolomeu Dias, an early Portuguese explorer, explained his motives: to serve God and His Majesty, to give light to those where in darkness, and to grow rich, as all men desire to do. New technology also helped. A cartographer was a map maker. Maps became a vital part in exploring the New World. An astrolabe was a tool for determining latitude while at sea. Combined with new maps, the astrolabe allowed for the plotting of more accurate and more sea friendly routes to the Spice Islands and other destinations. It also allowed them. The astrolabe was originally designed by the Greeks and later perfected by the Arabs. Portugal took the lead in overseas exploration. With the tip of Africa finally rounded, the Portuguese continued pushing east. In 1497, Portuguese explorer Vasco de Gama began exploring the East African coast. In 1498, he reached the port of Calicut on the southwestern coast of India. De Gama and his crew were amazed by the spices, rare silk, and precious gems that filled Calicut's shops. The Portuguese sailors filled their ships with such spices as pepper and cinnamon and returned to Portugal in 1499. Their cargo was worth 60 times the cost of the voyage. De Gama's remarkable voyage of 27,000 miles had given Portugal a direct route to India, but it wasn't without cost. Scurvy. Scurvy is a disease marked by swollen, bleeding gums due to a lack of vitamin C. The trip back was rough. He lost half of his ships and many of his crew due to this horrible disease. But for those who lived, it was worth it. The Gama returned and sold his spices at a huge profit and came back a hero. For pioneer Columbus greatly miscalculated the circumference of the earth by some 7,000 miles. His ships had not supplied enough food or water for the trip. He did not reveal to his crew how far they had actually traveled. In October of that year, Columbus reached an island in the Caribbean. He thought that he had reached the East Indies or Spice Islands, hence the natives who lived there were called Indians. Although he hadn't hit his target, his voyage his voyage would open the way for European colonization of the Americas, a process that forever would change the world. The, tre- the Portuguese believed that Columbus had indeed reached Asia. Portugal suspected that Columbus had claimed for Spain lands that Portuguese sailors might have reached first. The rivalry between Spain and Portugal grew more tense. In 1493, Pope Alexander VI stepped in to keep peace between the two nations. He suggested an imaginary dividing line drawn north to south through the Atlantic Ocean. All the lands to the west of the line, known as the Land of Demarcation, would be Spain's. These lands included most of the Americas. All lands to the east of the line would belong to Portugal. Spain and Portugal signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, in which they agreed to honor the line. Thus, when a Portuguese captain was blown off course as he sailed around Africa, he landed in Brazil. Brazil was claimed for Portugal because it lay east of the demarcation line. Today, most of South America speaks Spanish, but Brazil speaks what? That's right, Portuguese. Like Columbus, Amerigo Vespucci made 4 trips to the New World. He sailed down the coast of South America and not until 1507 did the Italian explorer suggested that Columbus had discovered a new world. 1 year after Columbus died, in 1507, a German mapmaker read Vespucci's accounts and printed the first map showing the New World to be separate from Asia. He named it America after Amerigo Vespucci. Columbus died in 1506, not knowing he had found a new continent.
While Christopher Columbus discovered America, he didn't lend it his name. That honor falls to the Italian navigator Amerigo Vespucci.
Amerigo Vespucci was one of the first to realize that North and South America were nowhere near Asia, were separate continents.
Columbus, on the other hand, never ceased to believe that his discoveries were part of Asia.
Born in Florence, Italy in 1451, Amerigo Vespucci held a series of jobs: merchant, steward, banker, and ultimately operated a ship outfitting business in Sevilla, Spain, before becoming an explorer in his 40s.
He apparently met Columbus, and through conversation with him, sparked his interest in going to the Indies, which is what the Spaniards called the Americas.
In 1497, Vespucci sailed with a fleet of Spanish ships in search of a western passage to the Indies and landed in Central America. He is believed to have sailed as far north as the Gulf of St. Lawrence before returning to Spain.
On May 16, 1499, Vespucci sailed from Cadiz to the New World and explored along the coast of Brazil, and in the course of that voyage discovered the Amazon River.
Vespucci's third voyage embarked in 1501, this time in the service of Portuguese King Manuel I. Passing through the Cape Verde Islands, Vespucci explored the coasts of Brazil and Argentina, where he discovered present-day Rio de Janeiro and studied the Native Americans.
When Amerigo Vespucci returned from his third voyage, he asserted that the lands that he had explored were not, as Columbus had insisted, part of Asia, but were instead part of the New World.
Vespucci called it a new fourth part of the world, alongside Africa, Asia, and Europe.
Records are mixed as to whether Vespucci sailed on 1 or 3 additional expeditions to the New World. What is known is that he returned to live in Spain, and in 1508 was awarded the prestigious office of Pilot Major. On February 22, 1512, Amerigo Vespucci died of malaria in Sevilla, Spain.
The New World received the name America, a feminized version of Amerigo Vespucci, because Vespucci was a good propagandist. Amerigo's writings about the New World were much more known than anything Columbus had written.
The German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller produced a world map in 1517. On this world map, he claimed that Amerigo Vespucci had actually been the first person to make landfall on what we now know as America or South America. It's been named America ever since.
Throughout this presentation, I hope that you've been marking down what the great achievements of each explorer have been, along with any other notes in your INB as we set this up in class the other day. Because later next week, you will be having a test on the first Americans and the Age of Exploration. Good luck, scholars.
While Christopher Columbus discovered America, he didn't lend it his name. That honor falls to the Italian navigator Amerigo Vespucci.
Amerigo Vespucci was one of the first to realize that North and South America were nowhere near Asia, were separate continents.
Columbus, on the other hand, never ceased to believe that his discoveries were part of Asia.
Born in Florence, Italy in 1451, Amerigo Vespucci held a series of jobs: merchant, steward, banker, and ultimately operated a ship outfitting business in Sevilla, Spain, before becoming an explorer in his 40s.
He apparently met Columbus, and through conversation with him, sparked his interest in going to the Indies, which is what the Spaniards called the Americas.
In 1497, Vespucci sailed with a fleet of Spanish ships in search of a western passage to the Indies and landed in Central America. He is believed to have sailed as far north as the Gulf of St. Lawrence before returning to Spain.
On May 16, 1499, Vespucci sailed from Cadiz to the New World and explored along the coast of Brazil, and in the course of that voyage discovered the Amazon River.
Vespucci's third voyage embarked in 1501, this time in the service of Portuguese King Manuel I. Passing through the Cape Verde Islands, Vespucci explored the coasts of Brazil and Argentina, where he discovered present-day Rio de Janeiro and studied the Native Americans.
When Amerigo Vespucci returned from his third voyage, he asserted that the lands that he had explored were not, as Columbus had insisted, part of Asia, but were instead part of the New World.
Vespucci called it a new fourth part of the world, alongside Africa, Asia, and Europe.
Records are mixed as to whether Vespucci sailed on one or three additional expeditions to the New World. What is known is that he returned to live in Spain, and in 1508 was awarded the prestigious office of Pilot Major. On February 22, 1512, Amerigo Vespucci died of malaria in Sevilla, Spain.
The New World received the name America, a feminized version of Amerigo Vespucci, because Vespucci was a good propagandist. Amerigo's writings about the New World were much more known than anything Columbus had written.
The German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller produced a world map in 1517. On this world map, he claimed that Amerigo Vespucci had actually been the first person to make landfall on what we now know as America or South America. It's been named America ever since.